At the very core of the Roman Empire, physical attractiveness came to be regarded as a valuable commodity, and social connections were seen as having the ability to determine one's future. The process of choosing male concubines offered the opportunity for closeness, as well as access to influence, wealth, and a life tied to the emperors of the empire. In this video that we have for you today, we will delve into the secret selection process and the complex criteria that were applied to individuals who wished to be male concubines. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more content. Not only did the most powerful and influential people in ancient societies and religious systems have wives, but they also had concubines. This was common practice. Concubines typically had two purposes. The first was to enhance a man's reputation by demonstrating his ability to father offspring, and the second was, unsurprisingly, to provide infinite possibilities to gratify sexual urges. The majority of people get an image of ancient China when they think of concubines because it was common practice for Chinese emperors to keep thousands of concubines. However, the practice of having concubines is by no means limited to China. The practice of taking a concubine dates back thousands of years to the civilizations of ancient Mesopotamia and Babylonia, where the upper members of society had concubines, many of whom were slaves. Despite this, the first wife always maintained a place of priority in the family, even when there was also a concubine in the household. In several city-states, women had very high social ranks and served in roles similar to those of priestesses. These ladies did not, on the whole, enter into marriage. In various Mesopotamian societies, males would visit women who worked as prostitutes. This was not only accepted by society, but it was also regarded as a respectable and dignified way to complete religious duty. This was the case regardless of whether or not the man was married. The selection of male concubines in the Roman Empire was based not only on their physical attractiveness, connections, and readiness to submit during sex, but also on their capacity to exhibit the traits of valor and sexual conquest that distinguished Roman masculinity. Other factors included physical appeal, connections, and a desire to submit during sex. Roman male sexuality was considered a penetrator versus penetrated model. This model stipulated that a freeborn Roman man was supposed to seek sex with both male and female partners for as long as he fulfilled the penetrative role, with the morality of the relationship being judged by the partner's social rank rather than their gender. It was deemed improper to have sexual relations with specific people, such as the wife of another man, a marriageable daughter of another man, an underage son of another man, or the man himself. The Roman Empire was responsible for the production of a vast quantity of poetry aimed at young men. A number of these poems made allusions to the Roman practice of utilizing slaves for both homosexual and heterosexual purposes in their writings. Roman poets used Greek names in their homoerotically themed poetry, but this does not necessarily imply that the Romans viewed their homosexual activities as having a Greek origin, or that gay love simply became a topic of poetic joy among the Romans as a result of the influence of the Greeks. It's more likely that they were comfortable with Greek names and simply opted to use them because of their familiarity with the language. Despite the fact that he additionally incorporated mythological treatments of homoeroticism in his works, Ovid proposed a new agenda that centered on the love between men and women. He stated that making love with a woman is more joyful because pleasure is shared, and he asserted that this was true despite the fact that he also included homoeroticism in his writings. During the time of the Roman Empire, boys were held in higher esteem than women due to the perception that their physical traits, particularly the beginning of puberty, were more alluring than those of women. In the Roman Empire, It was not just limited to youths under the age of 20. Rather, older men occasionally selected the passive posture in intercourse, while permitting younger slaves to be more active. These guys went by a bunch of different names, and people referred to them in a bunch of different ways too. A gender non-conforming male is known as a sissy, which is a derogatory term that is typically connected with characteristics like being anally docile, attractive to women, and lacking in actual masculinity. In contrast, a male concubine was a non-Roman or Eastern professional dancer who indulged in simulated anal penetration before marrying a woman during the time of the Roman Empire. Tinnitus is a derogatory word for a male who is gender non-conforming. The fact that male concubines in the Roman Empire held a higher standing than partners, frequented dinner parties, and could be passed down as a legacy sheds light on power dynamics, while also highlighting the need of developing polite and consensual interactions within close relationships. The male concubine is a figure that, despite the grandeur and intricacy of ancient Rome, is sometimes overlooked by historians. A male concubine was more than just a friend or object of desire. He may be a slave or a freeborn adolescent who was intimately connected with some of the most prominent people in Rome. These connections were not merely for the purpose of individual gratification. Rather, they were intricate marriages that could have an effect on anything from political coalitions to legal disputes. Not only were male concubines objects of passion and cultural symbols in ancient Rome, but they were also, on occasion, major players in political and international affairs. Their relationships with prominent monarchs and officials sometimes put them in positions where they can influence diplomacy and build alliances. The story of Antinous, a young Greek male concubine who was favored by Emperor Hadrian, provides an illustration of this function. Antinous was a concubine. Antinous' effect was felt well beyond that of a simple intimate companion to Hadrian, despite the fact that Hadrian was recognized primarily for the depth of his devotion for Antinous. According to historical accounts, he participated in diplomatic engagements, such as accompanying Hadrian on official visits and being present for significant political talks. He also accompanied Hadrian on official visits. Hadrian and Antinous' relationship was more than just a romantic one. It was also a business one that required trust, knowledge, and the ability to make sound political decisions. Hadrian's admiration for Antinous was so great that, after Antinous' unsolved death, Hadrian elevated him to the status of a god, a remarkable honor that represented the crucial part he played. Relationships between individuals in ancient Rome were frequently open to the scrutiny of the public, and links with male concubines were not an exception to this rule. Due to the convoluted and oftentimes conflicting nature of the legal landscape, the ties in question became a breeding ground for scandals and conflicts. It appeared that some sexual behaviors with freeborn minors were punishable under the Lex Scantinia law, and it was frequently used as a tool to attack political adversaries. However, this was only one facet of a much larger social and legal framework that might result in difficulties. The allegation that Julius Caesar had a romantic relationship with King Nicomedes IV of Bithynia led to one of the most infamous scandals in history. The historical veracity of this incident is up to doubt, yet the fact remains that Caesar's opponents made effective use of it as a political weapon. In addition to particular controversies, the subject of the legal status of male concubines, in and of themselves, was a complicated and occasionally contentious one. Relationships with freeborn adolescents might lead to legal conflicts over matters such as inheritance and social standing if they were to arise, and it was not always easy to tell the difference between a slave and a concubine who was born free. Idolization of youth and beauty to the point where it led to unsettling practices was common in many cultures. It was not merely a trivial wish for male concubines to always look as though they were in their early 20s. Rather, they made it a point to do whatever it took, no matter how painful or extreme the procedure. One especially disturbing practice was known as infibulation, and it comprised a surgical technique in which a metal clasp or fibula was placed to a person in order to restrict their physical growth. The objective was to keep the high-pitched voice and youthful appearance that certain customers thought to be appealing. Homosexuality in ancient Rome was not so much about attraction and feeling as it was about transmission of power and status, using sex as a means to wield privilege and authority over others. A Roman citizen possessed the civic freedoms that permitted him to engage in such relations with any man lower in society than him, so proving his virility and ability to conquer others. These relations were legal under Roman law. It translates so directly to demonstrations of power that Roman males were known to orally rape their competitors in order to demonstrate their supremacy over them, while humiliating the victim, despite the fact that laws were put into place to prosecute the criminal and protect the status of the victim. What do you suppose the reasons were for the high prevalence of homosexuality in ancient Rome? Leave a comment below and let us know.